Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. We'll let people file in. As you're joining, if you could take a minute and just jump out in the chat, let me know where you're joining from. It's always interesting to see how global of a developer community we have. So we'd love to hear where people are coming in from. Chad, nice to see you. David, you too. Welcome, welcome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everybody. If I am the first to welcome you to the Zoom Developer Summit, so happy to have you here. If not, I hope you've been having an excellent day of interesting sessions about all the amazing things that we can do in our developer ecosystem here at Zoom. Today, we're going to be talking about how to use our high bandwidth technology and raw data to supercharge video applications and high performance workflows. So as introduced, I'm Andy Carluccio, head of client innovation at Zoom. And I'm super excited to speak to you today about all these amazing things that we can do to bring Zoom into your applications for seamless workflows and powerful end customer journeys. During this presentation, I may make forward-looking statements, and these would be governed by our safe harbor policy, which you can see on screen now. So please keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. And with all that being said, here's what we're looking at today in more specific detail. We're going to start by talking about what Zoom's raw data capabilities are and specific use cases about why you might deploy this technology into your app. We're going to also talk about the procedure for using raw data in our meeting SDK. We'll talk about high bandwidth mode and how that impacts your application's design. And we'll do a code level overview with some tips and tricks that come from our building of applications off of our own meeting SDK. And then finally, we'll do a case study on the broadcast ecosystem, a suite of tools that third parties have developed off of the technology. And we'll conclude with some final thoughts. So, what is raw data? What am I talking about when I say raw data capabilities? Well, raw data at Zoom means a bidirectional audio and visual link between Zoom and your application. We give you the ability to take the decoded audio and video buffers of the remote Zoom participants and their shared content and bring that into your application. You can also supply your own AV buffers back into Zoom without requiring intermediate virtual cameras or microphone loopbacks or things like that. And we give you tools that help you manage notices that inform participants about how their data is being used and accessed. Use cases abound for raw data, but these are a couple that came to mind. AI and machine learning. I'm sure you've all been talking quite a bit about this the past couple of years for sure. But artificial intelligence really does benefit from having raw access to the incoming audio and visual streams. This can be used for object recognition. There's a great session later today about image classification. Definitely check that out. It will also be using raw data and audio transcription as well. Another great use of Zoom raw data. Remote contribution. So taking the HD individual video and audio streams of remote guests and bringing that into the Pro AV segment opens up a lot of opportunities for talent appearing on air, regardless of where they're physically located in the world. And then finally, hybrid media. So the ability to get these individual streams enables developers to do a whole host of different things with remote media workflows. And it's the same pipelines as on-prem infrastructure, but now it's operating directly with remote video feeds inside of their application. So there's a lot of different things you can do when you have the individual video and audio streams available to your app. There's a flow for how we do this inside of our meeting SDK. And step one is obtaining permission. You need to get either local recording or live streaming permission within a meeting or webinar. You can get this programmatically, or you can get it through the host, granting you a role like a co-host or transferring host to you, granularly providing the permission like local recording permission, or doing it via a token. So there's a lot of different tools in the meeting SDK to help you get the permission, but that's where you start. Then the next step is subscribing to audio and video. So you need to tell our SDK which media streams you want. Who do you want them to be? What format should they be in? There are certain parameters that we give you access to and how you want to structure the media that gets returned to you. And then finally, you're going to process that raw data. You're going to make a hard copy of the data from the callbacks in our meeting SDK. And then you'll bring it into your media pipeline to do processing within your app. Next, I want to spend a minute on high bandwidth mode. And this is really a tremendous technology at Zoom that allows us to unlock raw data at scale. And what's so amazing about our HBM technology is that it lets you subscribe to multiple HD video streams simultaneously from our cloud. This is a huge differentiator for us, and it's very important for building high performance media pipelines, especially when we're talking about bringing in multiple remote contributors at once. So it consists of two backend flags. First is a flag for developers, and this removes the client-side limit on how many simultaneous HD video subscriptions can take place within the meeting SDK. The second flag is for end users, and this increases the server-side limit from 30 megabit per second to 100 megabit per second in any supported Zoom application or integration. So the HBM flag for developers must be enabled on the developer account by contacting Zoom support, and there's information on this in our documentation about what to reach out for specifically to get that enabled. The user HBM flag is optional, and it can be enabled on an account whose ZAC token is used with the meeting SDK. So for example, if you sign into an app as a specific user, then you can basically inherit the high bandwidth mode feature from that user account when they sign in. We're now going to get into the code specifically, and we're going to look at exactly how we would do this in our C++ meeting SDK for Windows. And I'm going to outline exactly how we would build an application that utilizes the raw data. So now we're going to get into the code. So the first thing I'm going to annotate here, I'm going to take a look at our join parameter object. So joining a meeting is done via a series of join parameters in the SDK. And there are several parameters in the join parameter object that relate to how the raw data should be structured in our callbacks. So, of course, you're probably familiar with whether your video should be on or off when you join a meeting by default. Those settings are in the join parameters. But there's also some raw data specific parameters located here around your stereo audio and your mix minus audio. And these are very helpful because they allow you to determine, based on the business logic of your application, whether we should be doing these things in the first place, such as mixing in the audio that you're returning into Zoom into what's fed back to you, or whether that audio should be presented in a stereo pipeline or in a mono pipeline. And this gives you, like I said, more flexibility and control. Now, petitioning the host. So this is, like I said, part of that programmatic access where you're going to be able to use the SDK to ask the host of the meeting, if you're not already the host, to get the permission you need to start your flow of raw data. And so this can be done both via the local recording feature and via streaming. So in this example, though, I'm showing the local recording. So here we are, and we're creating the request for privilege using the request local recording privilege function. And that's going to work off of our iMeeting service object in the Windows Meeting SDK. And once we've obtained that permission, well, basically what we're going to do here is we're going to use this request local recording privilege component of the meeting service that will initiate the request. And then when that's granted, we could then proceed to the next step, which would be starting the raw recording. And then after we're done, or when we no longer need the raw data, we can actually shut that down with the stop raw recording. So these steps work together, and again, it creates a flow. You request permission, you start the flow of raw data, and then you turn it off when you no longer need it. So moving forward, subscribing to video. So this is really important for identifying who we want to receive raw data from. So as is the case with the rest of the meeting SDK, there are these user IDs, and these are used all over the meeting SDK for pinning and spotlighting and sending chat messages and getting information about the participants. So just like you would use these throughout the rest of the meeting SDK, you're going to use these user IDs with our renderer inside of the raw data interface. So what we're going to do here is we're going to specify who do we want to receive, and then we're going to give some more information about the type that's going to be here in the raw data type. And this is going to basically allow us to set up, if you will, like a renderer node. That's again, it's inherited from the renderer delegate, but the way that this all comes together is really the key step here with the subscribe. So this is where we're providing the user ID to the subscribe for the renderer that we're working on. And this is going to create the relationship between a Zoom participant and the ability to obtain their raw data feeds. So now we're going to actually get the data back. And the first thing that we're going to do, so up here, we've just defined a struct to hold the raw data, because we're going to strongly recommend that you make a hard copy of the frames as they come in so that they're controlled by your media pipeline and not by the meeting SDK after you've received them. So the data is coming in through a callback on raw data frame received, and it's got information about it that we're going to use to make a hard copy of that data so that the rest of our application can proceed to use it. So here we are again, continuing that callback. And you can see that we're making a hard copy of the YU and V buffer based on the size information that we had before. And we're processing all of that again to make it ready for our media pipeline to control it and not for the meeting SDK. So we don't want to reference the original data that was in the callback. We're making a hard copy of it so that we can use it elsewhere in our pipeline. There's also a callback that's available at the bottom here for when the status of the raw data change, such as when we switch our pipeline on and off. If that has implications for your media pipeline, you can listen to the callback there. Similar story for subscribing to audio. You're going to use that user ID to make the subscription. There's a couple things that are interesting with audio, such as the ability to subscribe to mixed audio or individual audio inside of our pipeline. So if you wanted to get all of the meeting audio mixed together into a single buffer, you can do that, or you can provide an actual ID to be able to get just for a specific participant. And that you can see with the node ID that's coming back from the callback, whether or not that raw data is representative of a single user or is part of the mix of the overall meeting, or is actually part of the share audio pipeline as well. That's another feature we expose, whether you want to get the shared audio. So again, we split that all out for you. So you have the ability to subscribe to the individual audio, the overall meeting audio, or the shared audio that would come from something like a screen share. Now, the formats for the media stream. So for the audio formats, we have some of this information on screen. This will depend on, again, how you set up your join parameters. For example, we set it up for stereo, so the number of channels that we're going to get is stereo. Right now, we have 32K support. We're looking at expanding that in the future as well. And you can see how that would impact your processing pipeline, right? So you want to be intentional about how you set up your join parameters so that they reflect the audio raw data in a format that you're going to be able to process it on the receive side, such as the choice of, mono versus stereo. Oh, and the video, of course, YUV420 standard for what we're using here at Zoom. So now we're talking about the reverse direction. How do we take video from our application that was generated by our app and provide that back into Zoom? It's basically the reverse process. We're going to be able to set up a video source and turn it on, and then we're going to start providing frames to it. And that's how we're going to send the data back up to Zoom. So here we go. We're inside of, again, the video source, and we're going to enable video. And then we're going to set that source to the raw data video source. And here we go. We're also setting up the external renderer. So we're basically here, we're saying that the video source helper, we're setting the external video source in this function here. If we march forward, this is now in the callback area. So here we have the initialization of our video pipeline, the callback when we're ready to start sending the frames. And this is where we're actually handling the handover of the raw video from the custom built app, in this case, to the meeting SDK. And that process continues here. We're doing some things specific with WinAPI, because of course I'm showing you in the Windows SDK for C++ how we would do this. Fairly standard stuff, talking about the size of our frame, providing the individual frames in a format that we can then send back with some delay to the meeting SDK. And then of course we can stop sending the video frame. We get a callback for that so that you can do whatever it is, like suspending your thread, that you want to do in your app. Same thing can be done with audio. So it's very much the same journey. We'll kind of go through this quickly, but we enable audio. We set the source to be our application, and then we provide that audio when we get into the callbacks, and we structure that data appropriately to send back into the meeting SDK. So fairly straightforward. And again, this is a bidirectional link. So we've shown you how to extract the individual video and audio streams, and now we've shown you how to supply them back, so that if your app is making this kind of link where you're pulling things out and sending things back in, you can see on both sides how you would make that happen. So with that, we're now going to jump into a demo of our Zoom ISO application. Zoom ISO is a commercial app that we created that uses our very own meeting SDK. In this case, it's for Mac OS. So I've showed you the Windows code. Now I'm going to show you a Mac example. And we'll play a video here that will show you exactly how Zoom ISO does this in an application form factor. I'm now going to demonstrate our Zoom ISO application. Zoom ISO is built using the macOS Meeting SDK, and it is powered by raw data and high bandwidth mode. Zoom ISO allows us to join a Zoom meeting and extract the individual video and audio feeds at HD. So in the software, I can define a set of outputs and I can send them to various production protocols like NDI, Siphon, SRT, or physical connections like a display or an SDI expansion card. So in this case, I'll just set up a few outputs of various formats. And I am also going to join a meeting using a meeting URL. So I'm just going to drag that off screen for a moment, copy over my meeting link, and set my display name to Zoom ISO. And then I will join a meeting. So here's my join meeting dialog. I'll turn off my video and join. So here we are inside of a Zoom meeting. And now that we're in the call, I'm going to just shrink this window. And we'll set it over to the side here. You can see I have remote participants connected to the call. And what I'm going to do now is take a look at the structure of this meeting, where a host computer signed in under my work account is available, and that's the account with my profile picture. And then Zoom ISO, which is me, is not a privileged user in this meeting. So as we discussed, we're going to need to obtain raw data permission. And the way that we do this in Zoom ISO is we associate this idea of a capture mode. And a capture mode can be either live streaming or recording based on the context of the call. We give the user the option to decide between the two of these. I'm going to leave it to live stream. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enabled here in the enable output engine. Now the output engine in Zoom ISO combines a lot of the ideas of raw data permission into a simple to use user interface. So in this case, when I hit the enabled button, the first thing Zoom ISO tried to do was start the flow of raw data by starting a raw live stream. Now when the meeting SDK failed and returned an error code, we surfaced this dialog saying that we don't have permission to live stream. And we give the user the opportunity to petition the host via a request. And in this case, if I hit request permission, I'll now see this dialog is on the same computer I'm signed in as the host. So now we're looking at the host's dialog here, and I can grant that permission to Zoom ISO. And upon doing so, the flow of raw data has begun because the live streaming service has engaged. And I can look at this menu here and I can see that we're now live on a Zoom ISO live stream. If I did recording from this menu instead, so if I went back to standby and I switched to recording mode and I enabled that, you can now see that the petition is asking for recording permission. And I can request that permission, and now I'll have this dialog for the host, and I can allow recording. And now you'll see the recording in progress dialog. So now we're using the recording permission stack. The other thing that I can do is if I revoke the permission from Zoom ISO to record local files or to live stream, but I instead just promote Zoom ISO to a co-host role. So if we now look at our participant list, you can see that I've been made a co-host. Because I'm a co-host, recording permission is roped into that. So now I can just enable the engine and I don't have to petition anymore because I have a role that allows me to record already. So we can do explicit petitioning or we can inherit the permission via a role. So now that we're logged into the meeting and we've started the ability to capture callback frames of raw data, we're going to select participants from the meeting. So I'll select my host participant. I will select maybe Barry and maybe Kelly as well. So in this case now, I can see statistics on the incoming Zoom video feed of these remote participants. And it can take about a minute for things to settle in at the proper resolution and frame rate when we subscribe to multiple video feeds simultaneously. So you can see that my camera feed here is 1920 by 1080, and you can see that the other video feeds are starting to approach the target frame rate and resolution as well. And now in just a few moments, you've seen that the resolution has caught up and the frame rate is improving as well. Now the frame rate is fluctuating because we're showing the number of callbacks received of true video frames of the participant every cycle. And we're going to standardize this in Zoom ISO using a uniform sampler so that our downstream outputs are insulated from the variable frame rate. So if, for example, I'm writing a video file to disk, I'm going to need to set that as a standard size, right? And I need to set a standard frame rate. The same principle is true with our live production protocols like NDI. I can preview this video feed and now I can see those remote participants connected in. So we can preview them there and we can see the application. And now I could be sending these to downstream services. So that's on the video side. Now we're extracting the individual video and audio feeds of our remote guests. If I had set the embedded ISO audio, if these participants were speaking in the meeting, you'd be able to observe that. Now I have a couple other behaviors in here. I'm listening to callbacks about whether the participant has left the meeting or has turned off their video. So I can set customized fallback behavior. In this case, I'll set a test card fallback. And if I turn off my video feed as the host in the meeting, and then I look at the preview on the output here, you can see that now we're showing just this test card image. So the downstream systems are sort of insulated from some of this behavior. We don't necessarily cut off the flow of frames, but we just replace them with customized behavior. I could also set this to black, for example, and after my preview refreshes, you'll see now that that's a black video feed that would be going out over the NDI feed. And as soon as I re-enable the camera, it'll catch up on the frame rate and resolution, and there is the video feed again, right? So we have some customized behavior up top, and we also are setting explicitly the resolution that we want to request from Zoom. So for example, if I set 360p, what we've basically done now is we've called the function in the meeting SDK to set the resolution of this node. And so now the video feed is coming in at 360p, which you can see based on the statistics for that incoming feed. And I can bump that back to HD as well. And in a moment, it'll be back to 1080p. And like I said before, if the incoming video feed differs from what we had requested, we have a standardization layer that can manage that. Now I'm going to go over to the advanced audio tab, and I'll set a custom audio device on my system, a virtual audio device. And what's cool about this is that we have enumerated several different submixes and capabilities based on the context of the meeting. So I'm going to unmute myself on the host machine, and I'm going to first just set this to mix. And what you're going to see immediately is activity on channel 1 of this device. And these are the raw audio callbacks from the mix channel of meeting audio. But I can also set this to be the audio from an individual participant. So in this case, I could set it up to be me, and you'll see that these are going to match now because I'm the only one speaking in this meeting. I also have the ability to select between left and right channels for myself. So I could set up something in this format, and right now my left and right channels are the same, but you can see the difference because of the pan law between channel 1 and 2 and 3 because we're mixing into mono in this situation here, but we have set up the meeting SDK to provide us stereo callbacks in all cases. You also may have noticed that we have additional types like screen share. So for example, if I create an additional output on my video side, you can see that I can actually subscribe to a whole host of different properties, including somebody based on their position in the gallery view, or I can get the active speaker, or I could get the screen share either active in the meeting or of a particular participant. So if I set this to active screen share and somebody were to share their screen, I'll go ahead and share my meeting window in this case, and you'll be able to see that an active share has started, and you should see kind of a loop of my other screen where the meeting is taking place. Now we can extract that as well. If this was shared with audio, we would be able to extract that both in the Outputs tab and in the Advanced Audio tab. One final note under Participant Management, we have a couple of interesting things going on. In this tab, mainly it's a dashboard that combines certain statistic information about the meeting SDK participants so that we can view this in a centralized area and manage routing across our entire fleet from one centralized dashboard. So you can mix and match different components of the meeting SDK to achieve your desired outcome. And with that, that concludes our demo of Zoom ISO. Well, great. So that, again, brings us to the next chapter of our presentation here. But I hope that taking that little detour to take a look at Zoom ISO gives you the idea of a real world experience that we have from an app that we actually create off of the same developer tools that we give to third parties to use as well. So from there, I want to expand the scope a little bit beyond just our own application and talk about a case study of what we've done in the broadcast industry using our meeting SDK. So at NAB of 2023, we announced simultaneous integrations across multiple different leading software switchers in the broadcast market segment. And all of these developers were leveraging the Zoom developer ecosystem to bring our functionality into their applications. So these include third parties that you see on the right-hand side of the screen, We also made some announcements, including this year, about some new applications on the left-hand side that Zoom also produces with our SDKs. So we have our Liminal brand, and Liminal is a company that Zoom acquired in 2021, these applications, and we use them as part of our pro production solution, as part of our Zoom Events platform. So Zoom ISO, which you just saw demos on, as well as our new Tiles application, are based on the technology that we just demonstrated in the Meeting SDK. We also have plugins for leading 3D engines, including Unreal Engine and Unity, where you can actually bring in the remote video feeds directly into Unreal Engine, for example, which we used for our own Zoomtopia project. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, third-party developers have really embraced the Meeting SDK. And across the industry, now Zoom is almost universally integrated into all the leading players that are used in this space. And that's because of the reliability and the power of the Meeting SDK really speaks to that. And I think Ken from the Ecamm team put it really nicely, and I'll just leave this quote on screen for a moment when he talked about the his experience developing with our Meeting SDK. Really grateful to work with the Ecamm team on their integration, which just came out of beta earlier this month. And I appreciate this quote because I think it speaks to a lot of what we're trying to do with Meeting SDK and what that can offer to all of your applications as well. Final thought from me, just on a personal note, I started as a student developer with the Meeting SDK back in undergrad at University of Virginia in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit and shut everything down. I went home and tried to figure out how to make performance art migrate from the stage to the screen. And I was gravitated to Zoom because of this developer ecosystem that you're learning about during this summit. And because of how open the Zoom platform is and how powerful and configurable it is, I was able to make applications that made it possible to do this type of work and eventually broaden that into the concept of events at large. And it's been an incredible blessing for me to be able to now do that as part of the Zoom team, having now joined since the asset purchase of Liminal. And I think that as Zoom developer ecosystem and tools have changed my life and my business, I truly believe that it can do the same for you. And that's something that we feel like has been emphasized with the third parties that we've worked with. And I'm confident that we can do the same for you in your applications, whether it's through raw data or other interesting things that you're learning about through our developer summit today. I'm sure that these things will all come together to help you just as they've helped me. So with all that being said, would love to take any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I know that there is a packed schedule today of amazing things that you could check out, and we'll connect with you maybe at the networking session at the end of the day. So with that, I'll conclude the screen share and we'll just spend a minute if there's any questions. And then if not, we'll shut down our webinar today. All right, well, I don't have any questions on our side, but you're more than welcome to engage with us on the forums at any time. And we're happy to provide guidance. And we'd love to see what people are doing with our SDKs. So with that, thanks again for coming to today's session. And I look forward to connecting with you throughout the rest of the summit and at the networking session, and have a great rest of your day.